Recording in progress. So hello, everybody. I'm glad you can join. And if you'd like to turn your camera on, we do this as a meeting versus a webinar. The one great thing about Susan and May is that they love it to be interactive. So feel free to ask questions. So just a couple of things. If you haven't read our most current spring issue of AC Magazine, please check it out. There's so much great content in there, beautiful pictures. Click through, see what you like. And our summer magazine will be coming up at the end of June, and it is our anniversary issue. So if you or your company has, if your company has a big anniversary, 5, 10, 15, let us know. We want to make sure that we get that covered. We have quite a few more webinars coming up, so always make sure you're checking out our event calendar on our website. We have another webinar tomorrow with Morgan Media on strategies for social media content that converts. If you've seen any of our little reels that have been done by our on Instagram, on our socials, Morgan Media has done a lot of those. We have our monthly member meetup on Thursday, so please make sure you're joining that. And then on the 21st, we have renewal logistics with expanding distribution through logistics. And then something that I'm very excited about is we have our holiday press luncheon. We're changing it up this time around, and our gift guide, that is July 25th. It's going to be a very special luncheon for the press where you will be able to present your products. Your product, you pick this is the must-have item for the holiday. And you'll get to meet one-on-one with the press afterwards, but it's going to be, we'll be doing the presentations on your behalf to the press. So it's going to be a really fun event. And if you want more information on any of those things, feel free to reach out to me. All right, so I'm going to turn this over to Susan and May from Collaboratory Consulting Group. They can introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what they do, and then let's get right into it. The question always is bigger better? I mean, I don't know.
So before we get to that, we like to just start by saying hello and introducing ourselves and then asking you guys to do the same. Susan and I have worked, well, Susan's worked as an entrepreneur. I've worked in corporate America, and we came together a couple of years ago to put our expertise together and start giving guidance and advice and strategic advising to clients, people, entrepreneurs just like you who have products who are trying to break into the retail space. We cover all sorts of topics in our work, which we'd be happy to talk to you about offline if you're so inclined. But today, of course, as Cindy said, we're here to talk about is bigger better. That being said, before we get into that, Ty, can you tell us a little bit about your company?
Yes, I have a luxury leather goods line and basically everything made in Italy. The brand is called Amami, which means love me in Italian. So the goal is to build products that embrace self-love, self-acceptance, and being your authentic self. So I have different styles. Like I have the me bag, it's hard to see it, but different little pieces that are like celebrating people's, my customers' individuality.
Got it. And when did you found your company?
I found the company probably a couple of years ago, but really becoming really active as of most recently because I worked a full-time job.
Got it. That's a story that we hear often. It's a lot, what a lot of people do. They have a passion, they have a dream, they also have this, need for income. So of course, a lot of these, for a lot of people, they start these things as side gigs, and then hopefully the side gig gets to be prominent enough and gets to be sufficient that they can leave their job and dedicate themselves full-time to their business. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
That's great. Okay, so Jonathan, can you tell us what you do? Or are you with the Accessory Council?
My name is Jonathan Hyman. I'm with the intellectual property law firm Kenobi Martins. We're new members of Accessories Council and looking for opportunities to learn about what the obstacles my clients face. We do a lot of work in the fashion and accessories space.
Fantastic. All right, thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now and get into the presentation. If you've done our webinars before, and some of you have, then you know, hold on one second, here we go. Then you know that, of course, your comments, your questions, your input is welcome. Feel free to interrupt us, chime in, ask a question, offer feedback, tell us about your experience. The more interactive this is, the more engaging a discussion this is for everyone. So, is bigger better? Susan and I, as I said, have pretty divergent backgrounds. Susan started her own company, ran that for many years, was able to take it international, had her products sold at Barney's and Bergdorf Goodman and Saks Fifth Avenue and many other stores, which she can tell you about, before deciding that it was time to simply take a break and step away from entrepreneurial life. And now she and I work together as advisors. As I said, my background is more corporate, worked at Goldman Sachs and Citibank, project management, financial modeling, strategic planning, etc. We both have MBAs and we offer that expertise to each of our clients. And there we go. So the goal, as I said, is collaboration. Please feel free to jump in. Of course, our discussion is confidential and there are truly no bad questions. We have, in fact, heard it all.
And if you're not on screen and you want to talk, you know, feel free to type up even if you're not on screen, if you're here. So.
And we should just have one more person enter, so,
Oh,
Okay.
fantastic.
yeah.
Let me just see.
So Pearl just entered, so.
Got it. Pearl, can you hear us? And before we get into our presentation, can you tell us a little bit about your company?
Sure. Right now, I still consult basically with friends who are going back to work. So it's interesting that you're a consultant company and maybe they can have something to offer you and just to see what people are doing today.
Okay, fantastic. And are your friends who are going back to work, are they in the retail space?
They're in the manufacturing, wholesale production field. But and marketing, so their skill set is there and they're more experienced. And yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So, as you are trying to decide what is the best channel for me to sell my products, there are a couple of things that we want you guys to think about. The first question is, where have you had retail success? Have you done very well with a, referral basis, not necessarily going viral, but one friend told another friend who told another friend? Are you doing well with local farmers markets? Are you selling at individual boutiques? Are you, having trunk shows in your home? There are any number of options when it comes to retail. There are a large number of ways that you can sell. The question that you need to ask yourself is, what has worked for you in the past and where is it that you want to go? Right? We often talk to clients who come to us and they say, I would love to sell at Target. And then we start talking to them a little bit more. And what they've got is a pretty high-end product, in which case Target's not really the right store for them, but Target has a brand name, right? There's a size and an economy of scale that goes along with that. That's very attractive to a lot of people. That doesn't mean that that's the right store for your brand. So we have another client who has very high-end merchandise, and she's trying to figure out how she can set up a relationship with QVC, which doesn't necessarily make sense, but what she's essentially doing is creating different products for QVC and launching a sort of a separate sub-brand from her main product. So as you consider these things, where have you had success in the past and where do you want to go? And then what makes sense for you and for your particular product? What makes your product meaningful to the people who buy it? What makes it impactful, right? Is it the best widget that they've ever seen and you need to offer more of it? Or is it something else? It's all stuff that you want to think about. And then specifically for the big retailers, they have specific expectations about your infrastructure. In other words, do you have manufacturing to meet their needs? Do you have, and we can get more into this further in the presentation, do you have your operations in place to be able to sell to the very large retailers, be it Target or Bloomingdale's or Saks Fifth Avenue? Any questions about that? Okay, Susan?
Okay, so as May kind of just mentioned, alignment is really the name of the game. So what type of stores align with your brand? Are you a more mass market brand where Target would be a good fit? Are you a more high-end brand where you could sell to a small end boutique chain like Stanley Korshak, or a bigger department store? You really have to think, or is it really the smaller boutique around the country that fit with your brand? So it's really important to think before you decide where you want to sell, what fits with your brand. Because as May said, we have so many clients who come to us and say, I just want to go big. And there's so many, having lived this life and sold to every size department store around the world, it's amazing, but there are a lot of work and a lot of things you have to think about. So the other thing is really think about, where do your customers shop? If your customers are shopping at high-end boutiques, then Target's not the place for you. If your customers are shopping at more mass market stores, then something like Target or another store like that could be a great fit. So the other thing is price points, because you never really want to compromise your price points. When you work with bigger stores, they often ask you to lower your price, so your margins are often lower. Sometimes I remember Anthropologie and other stores would come in and take a piece that was $30 on my line and want it for $12. So I had to do a lot of reconfiguring, change the fabrications, talk to my manufacturers, see how we could get the prices down to make it work. Often it worked. But when I realized that I was getting a 20,000 piece order and making $1 a piece, it wasn't going to work. So that's something you really have to think about and really stay true to yourself so that you know that you're making the margins that you need to make. Brand value also goes a long way. In terms of alignment, you want to make sure you're aligning with stores that are consistent with your brand value, so that you're not compromising who you are and what your brand is. Again, often people do a second line or a lower end version if they want to sell. They have a great opportunity to sell to a more mass market retailer. Sometimes it's a great idea to do a sub-brand if you're a luxury brand. And that's a great way to tackle that. Any questions before we go to the next slide?
Sorry.
That's okay. Okay, benefits of going big. Larger orders often mean higher revenue. You need fewer orders to reach your goal. Production often, economies of scale makes a big difference. If you can put in an order for 2,000 pieces or 10,000 pieces, your manufacturer is going to be thrilled. If you have 5 pieces of one, 5 pieces of another, 5 pieces of another, they're not going to be happy. I did both, and I set up smaller factories to do production for my smaller stores. So that's something to think about too, because some of the bigger manufacturers will charge you more and want bigger volume. And sometimes if you can find a smaller manufacturer who will take care of the smaller orders, that's a good way to get around it. Bigger stores also often offer private label opportunities. And for me, having the chance to work with buyers and develop products was really eye-opening and was a great opportunity to really understand what the market needed, what the buyers knew their customers wanted. And if you can get an opportunity like that, it's really great. Big stores give you marketing exposure, which is great. Once I sold to Barney's, every other department store came calling. So there's something to be said about getting into some stores that have some real great reputation where everybody knows them, but you also have to make sure it fits and that you can handle selling to them. Any questions before I move on? No? Okay. Okay, so some of the costs and considerations that we find smaller brands aren't aware of. Many of the bigger stores have onboarding fees. For instance, and we keep talking about Target just because we have some connections there. We've had a lot of conversations with them, but they charge you a huge fee just to be a vendor. So before they will even consider working with you, they have to know that you have the money and they charge you a huge setup fee and then will work with you. EDI is.
I'm just
the
gonna, I'm
Go
just gonna
ahead.
interject for a quick second.
ahead.
When stores are charging these fees, they're doing it, one, to make sure obviously that you have the cash available, but two, it's simply a gatekeeping fee, right? They want to know, because otherwise everybody would be applying to be a vendor at Target, right? They set this hurdle very high in the beginning to make sure that you're really committed to selling through them. And then that's just the beginning of it. Susan obviously will walk you through more.
Right, and that being said, a lot of these bigger stores also have incubator programs, which is something to look into. Target has an incubator program, and then you can pitch them. And there may be instances where they'll waive some of the fees. So some of these big stores, it's a good idea to look into, do they have an incubator program where you can really learn and get some exposure. EDI is electronic, now of course I'm
Data.
blocking what it
Data.
stands for. Data. So all your invoices come, all your orders come through electronically. It's often a long onboarding system. But once you have it set up, it runs pretty smoothly. There's also the bigger stores want you to ticket and bag all your products. So, and often you are responsible for paying for the tickets, probably most of the time. I don't think there was ever a time that they paid for the tickets. When you're selling to an online store, you usually have to bag each product in a separate bag with a separate label. So that's just something to think about in terms of your time. If you have an order for 1,000 pieces and you have to ticket each piece, or your factory has to ticket each piece, or you have to bag each piece, you have to take those costs into consideration and the time it takes to do that. Chargebacks are common. If you pack a box and the tape is on wrong, if you don't label it right. Some stores are notorious for chargebacks, and often there's nothing you can do about it, even if you know that you've done it right. And it's just something they kind of build into their process. So you have to be aware of chargebacks. They could be $200 an order, they could be more, they could be less, but they do happen. Marketing costs, sometimes the store will say, we want to put you front and center, or I have had a situation where Henry Bendel asked me to be in a New York Times ad. And I was like, so excited. And then they said, it'll cost you $2,000. So, which I did. And it was amazing. And I have the ad hanging over my desk and I have no regrets, but they do charge you to market you. So something else to think about. Also, like I spoke about before, your margins may be lower because they're going to ask you to reduce your costs. If you can figure out a way to reconfigure your product and make it work for them, because you also, if you're selling at a lower price, you want your product to be different so that people don't say, well, why is this product selling for X at this store and yet it's selling for this amount on your website or something else. So if you're working with larger stores and they're asking you for lower prices or lower margins, then often it's a good idea to change the product just a little bit so that people aren't going to say, well, it's less expensive here. What's the difference? Or sometimes putting their label on it or changing the label and having, as I said, a sub-brand. Funding a large order is something you really have to think about. I ended up, when I had my business, taking out a small business loan so that I could fund the orders, because you are paying your vendors on time usually, and you're paying for all the fabric and all the materials that you need, but you often won't be paid for 60 to 90 days. So you have to be able to have the funds to be able to pay to get that order out the door. So anybody have any questions about this? Has anybody run into anything like this?
Susan, I do have a question for you.
Sure.
And, I have heard recently more stores are asking for, okay, I need 50 points in margin or 55 point, whatever it is, but then you also have to pay a 2% technology fee and a 1% DFI fee. Have you been hearing about all these additional fees they're charging?
There are a lot of fees, and the biggest problem that, the biggest problem that we find is that people aren't ready for that. And when I started my business, I learned the hard way. I learned with every order, I learned, oh my God, they're not paying for tickets. I have to pay for tickets. So now I have to add that to my cost. So it's a really good idea if you're working with any type of store, even if it's a smaller store, to really ask upfront before you give them a price, what are the fees associated with an order? If I used to make the mistake at a trade show when a buyer would come in from a bigger store and say, okay, can we do it for this price? And I would get kind of lost in the moment and say yes, and then go back to my office and say, oh my God, why did I say yes? So one thing that we tell clients all the time is never say yes on the spot. You are okay, and nobody will penalize you for saying, I need to know all the details and let me get back to you with the price that works for us. So it's okay to do that, and you really do need to protect yourself because, as Cindy said, there are so many fees these days, and you don't want to get caught in a situation where you have a very big order that's going to cost you a fortune to produce, and you're making a really small margin because, as we said, it's great to get these orders, but if you're making $1 a piece on a huge order, it's probably not worth your time. So that's a great point, Cindy. Thanks for bringing that up. So another thing that May and I work with our clients is really testing the market. Make connections, reach out to buyers. It's not as easy these days as it used to be, but we suggest making a one-pager of some sort to really pitch your brand. So if you're reaching out to a buyer, you have all the benefits of your brand, where you've sold, why your brand makes sense in their store. Always understand the buyer and the store that you're trying to sell to. Go to the store, look online, know what selections they have, know what competition they have, so that when you go in there, you're really informed and you can have a great discussion with them about why you are such a good fit or why they should pick you over somebody else. Also, as we said, ask questions. Ask what it means to sell to their store. What are the costs involved? How do they, if they place a big order, what does delivery look like? If they place a reorder, when do they expect that? How quickly do they expect that? For some of you, you may have stock. I never had stock in my products. I always made things to order. So I was really had to be aware of, okay, if they place a regular order, they may give me 6 weeks, but if they want to reorder, they want it in 2 weeks. So it's really important to understand that. Our advice for many small businesses is to really start with the smaller chains because the buyers are more accessible and you can learn a lot from them. So some of the ones that we've been working with our clients with recently is Stanley Korshak, Von Maur, Gus Meyer. These are high-end chains, but sometimes the smaller chains will be more apt to talk to you. And once you get some traction with them, then if you want to go to the bigger department stores, you have the experience of working with a department store that's a little smaller and easier to navigate. And the most important thing is go where your customers are. As we said, if you have a high-end product, Target is the wrong place for you. If you have a high-end product, you want to stick to where your customers are. If you have a middle market product, you want to stick to where your customers are. So really think about where your customers are shopping, because that's where you want to be. You always want to be in front of your customers so that you're targeting the people who are going to be interested in your product, your price point, and everything about your company. Any questions? No? Okay. So we are done with again, here's our information. We will send out an email to everybody so you'll have our information if you have any follow-up questions. But we'd love to open it up to a conversation and hear about any of your experiences. If you've spoken to buyers, what are your feelings about where you want to sell? Have you started selling to stores? Are you only online? So anybody who wants to start the conversation, we'd love to hear your experiences.
I'll start.
Okay, thank you.
Um, I I'm in this interesting space right now with the business because most recent months been able to really start being more attentive to the brand because I was working 60, 80 hours a week, a full-time gig. So what I'm trying to do right now is I want to basically build the exposure of the brand. So basically look at different boutiques because I think right now boutiques are going to be the best way to go. Like you said, work with the small retailers at this time because of the fact that I really need to understand my market more, and it gives me an opportunity to make the modifications into my market, things of that nature. So I'm really working hard to get that done. And also because I want to make sure from a fulfillment perspective, when you start going with the big retailers, you have to fulfill a large order. So I definitely know that. So I want to be able to control it. I want to be able to continuously evolve the brand, evolve the target audience as much as possible by going through boutiques. So what I'm trying to do now is someone told me I live in LA that there's a few showrooms that we have downtown. So I want to start looking at the showrooms. There was also a few databases that was provided over to me called Range Me was one, and there were some other ones in which you can look into these directories to kind of get an idea of all the different types of boutiques that we have across the nation. So I'm also in the process of planning that. I have a meeting actually this week or next week in which I'm going to be talking to someone at Saks. Someone actually give me an opportunity. She is the Rupal Patel. She is the fashion director at Saks, and I have an opportunity to meet with her in the next week or two. So I'm not ready to be at Saks, but I at least wanted to use that conversation to kind of learn what those requirements are to go in Saks. In a perfect world, because I see my brand as a luxury brand, and I know that because I'm still new to the business, my economies of scale, my profit margins is not where they need to be. And that's what I want to do is start continuously source out new materials, source out new manufacturers to get those profit margins where I want them. So in a perfect world, I've always envisioned myself having a sub brand and using a sub brand as an opportunity to go into the retailers, because that gives me an opportunity to use cheaper material. And also wanted my particular website, because it's direct to consumer, to have some level of exclusivity. So putting those limited edition pieces onto the website because I want to continue to generate revenue. So I'm not there yet, but I guess my question to you is, so have this conversation. It's a great opportunity to meet with someone at Saks, really pick her brain in terms of what's needed to get into the stores. And I know that Susan, you have had product in Saks. So I'm just curious in terms of like what has been that approach? How were you able to get them to bring in your product? Also, just kind of going back into the conversation in terms of you deciding, when did you decide boutiques were most appropriate versus when it was most appropriate to go into the big dogs like a Saks, Bordhoff's, etc.
So I started off selling to smaller boutiques because they were accessible, they would see me. And when I had my business, most department stores had something called Open Sea Day, where they would give you could wait online for hours to see a buyer. You had 5 minutes in front of the buyer and you could talk to them. So that was actually a great opportunity. I went back to Barney's 5 times. I really wanted to be in Barney's. And once Barney's ordered from me, it kind of took off from there. So there's something about picking a store that you feel is a great fit for you. And if you decide you want to be in a department store, and targeting that store, because once you're in one of the bigger stores, the other ones kind of trickle in. So that's one thing. When you're talking to this buyer, I would, first of all, do all the research you can do. Look on their website. If you can go to a Saks, see what does their handbag department look like? Who do they carry? Who's comparable to you? What price points do they carry? Just really feel like you know that inside and out. And then think about why you want them to carry your brand. How are you different? Why should they take a chance on you? What is it that they're looking for? What are their customers looking for? And, do as much research as you can so that the buyer knows you've done your homework. And then pick some really targeted questions you can ask about, how maybe it's, how do you bring in how many new vendors do you bring in a year? Or what size orders do you usually place with a new vendor? Do you start them on, a lot of department stores start people off on their online platform. So they often start you off online and then we'll move you into store. So that's another thing that happens. So I would really use it, as you said, as a informational meeting. Really use it to learn as much as you can about the retail space and really go in knowledgeable so she feels like you know what you're talking about, you know the store, you care about the store, and it's something that you would aspire to being in one of these days. So go in with those, go in with that, and I think you'll have a good conversation. There was one thing I wanted, and in terms of showrooms, we've heard a lot of horror stories about showrooms lately. I had an amazing showroom, which really helped me launch, but just make sure you ask a lot of questions. They do charge rent. We've had one brand, a handbag brand we worked with, and the showroom would not let them come to any shows. So to us, that was red flag number one. If they won't let you in the showroom and they won't let you at the shows, you are your brand. They should want you there all the time. I was at my showroom all the time. I met buyers at my showroom. All the time. I can't even tell you. So if you're thinking of a showroom, really ask them questions and be wary of how much they're charging you per month. Where are they going to place you in the showroom? Are you going to have a bottom shelf? Are you going to be front and center? Are they going to charge you different amounts for where you're placed in the showroom? Just go to the showroom, ask if you can talk to other brands that are being displayed in the showroom. Really get all the information you can get, because showrooms are expensive and you want to know what relationships they have. Do they do the trade shows? If they do the trade shows, do you do it as a group so you don't pay as much for a booth? Think about every question you have so that you really know what you're getting yourself into. And what kind of contract do you have to sign? Is it month to month? Do you have to sign up for a year? And I would be wary of anybody who doesn't want you there, who's going to make you sign a very long contract, and who's not going to tell you where you're going to be placed in the showroom, or how many visits do they have a month from bigger buyers? What size buyers do they work with? What stores do they work with? All of those kind of things. So that's something to really think about. I'm
going to chime in for a second. We hear from a lot of clients this notion that if I will only get on the shelves at X, then I will be on the map and my business will take off. And, we had a client who was in the food services space, who was working very, very hard to get her products on the shelves at Whole Foods. And the margins that she was going to make once she got on the shelves at Whole Foods were minuscule. So even though in her head it was this sort of brass ring for her company, at the end of the day, it wasn't that impactful. Susan and I always recommend to our clients, take every opportunity you have to get feedback on your products from the people who are going to be buying them. Right? This person at Saks is a fantastic person to give you feedback on your product, to talk to you about the Saks buyer, what they look for, what price point they want, what they expect in terms of quality, what they expect in terms of following the trends or not following the trends, how quickly you need to adapt your line. Get feedback from every single possible opportunity. So if Saks doesn't work out, or as you said, you're not ready for Saks, go back to the retail channels that are successful for you and talk to your customers. Ask them all sorts of very vague, broad questions that say, what are you looking for in a bag? What are you looking for in a wallet? And see what they say, right? Just get feedback, because it's exceptionally rare that one place will be the key. Right. There's a lot of, Cindy has heard us say this before. There are a lot of stories in the media about struggling Oliver Twist entrepreneur who was feeding their children cottage cheese and water. And then one day, poof, you know, the genie came down and somebody discovered them and everything changed. Now they're zillionaires, right? That is exceptionally rare. And you're far better off doing the foundational work to understand your customers, what they want, and how you can provide it to them. And making sure that when you go to meet with these buyers, that you're articulating to these buyers, I know my customers, I know what they want, here's how I've given it to them. Because that clear and concise message is what's going to break through a lot of the noise.
Right. And how are you different from everybody? What's your niche? What makes you different, and why should they take a chance on you? And in terms of one store making it for you, it's rare, but getting into one store can sometimes at least give you some edge in order, and other buyers may talk to you, but just like May said, get feedback. I think you may have been in one of our last webinars, but I started my brand as a hair accessory company with interchangeable silk flowers that had snap-on barrettes and headbands, and thought it was a great idea. I got a lot of traction in the smaller stores. I went to Barney's and they said, get rid of the snaps. We don't want to merchandise the snaps. So my entire brand changed. And I was willing to change it. Number one, it was great because it was much more cost effective for me, a lot less work. And it really, it didn't make that much of an impact. So my original idea changed because of my buyer. And then they asked me to start making scarves because they loved my fabric. So my entire brand made a huge change that I never would have dreamed. I would have been making silk scarves, and then Henry Bendel's asked me to make patchwork scarves, and we made them out of vintage kimonos and silk and velvet, but nothing I ever dreamed I would have been doing, but I listened to my buyers. So what May said is so valuable. Listen to what the buyers say, because they have so much, they can give you amazing feedback, and you can decide if you want to go ahead and do what they say. But if I hadn't listened to the Barney's buyer, I don't think I would have been able to build my brand the way I did. So use the community. Yeah.
And I basically just want to look at it from a role. I want to have the conversation with her because at this moment, as I stated, my profit margin is not where I want them to be. So when I think about it from a wholesaling perspective, I'm never going to set myself up that way. I'll never make the revenue. I think once I optimize and really feel comfortable in the infrastructure that I've built, then I can say, let's go to Saks. But at least having her eye the brand, I already have done consumer insights. I've done focus groups. So I have that data. And I'm also following up any customers that have purchased product, ask them what they like and what they dislike about it. So I'm gathering that information. And I also hired a consumer insights consultant to kind of help me strategize how to move forward with the data that I do have. My goal is ultimately to use this conversation is because she's very popular. She's known, she has connections. I want to start putting that seed in her brain that, you know, this is a brand to look up to, and maybe just to keep an eye on it, and maybe build a good rapport with her and say, hey, maybe not right now, but maybe in the future. So it's about building that relationship is what my primary goal at this time. And then at the same time, looking at the best way of thinking about it from a sub-brand perspective, or using as the opportunity to only have maybe a select few products available in retail and have a different set of products available online. That is the way that I'm envisioning this to go. But I think by at least having her look at the brand, what it does, it helps me know what modifications I need to make onto the brand. Like you were talking about the snaps and how you were able to expand the silk. And it basically getting that information helps me really flush out that product roadmap and know from a buyer. If I use Saks as the point of reference, that means that I can at least know what has that sellability, right? And I can still look at the boutiques, but I'm like, if I want to use that as my North Star, I have a great direction to go to move forward.
And it's incredibly valuable to be able to talk to buyers from bigger stores, because you will get a lot of feedback, and some of it you may want to listen to and some of it you may not want to listen to, but it's great to have the feedback because they have a much broader perspective. And there's nothing to say that you can't sell to a big department store and continue to sell to boutiques. I sold half of my business was small boutiques that placed reorders all the time, and they were great customers. And so that's something to think about. The other thing is the bigger department stores, you could also try to get some sense from her. Sometimes they would lead me and say, okay, I want you to design something like this. So they sometimes give you suggestions about what they want you to do. And that's kind of fun to work with a department store, or I used to work with Ann Taylor in Anthropology developing products. And to me, that was really fun because I got to learn from them and help build a new product, like you said, that wasn't necessarily on my line, but that was right for them. And the orders were big enough so that it warranted the time and the money and the effort.
That was very insightful. Thank you, Susan and May. I really do appreciate it. It's making me think things differently as I'm preparing for this meeting with her. I want to make sure that it's going to be very beneficial for me and also
Right.
hopefully build a new relationship that is long lasting. And I'm
Yeah.
have one quick question for you, Susan. When you are like pitching to these buyers, how did you like pitch your product? Did you have line sheets? What was kind of your elements that you have?
Well, when I started my business, I hate to admit this, but I really knew very little. I came up with this idea, decided I was doing it, had no design background, no business background. I just started business school and just decided I was gonna go for it. So at the beginning, I brought my samples and I
Mhm.
kind of relied on the fact that I had a product that was different and the interchangeability was kind of my niche. But it just so happened that all the stores loved my fabrics. And so I think that's probably what got me through. I'm not sure the interchangeability was fun. And a lot of the small stores liked it, but it was also the fabrics I chose. And I think that my eye for the fabric was what got them to end up buying my product and really liking it. But what was your, sorry, I got lost in my train of
No,
thought.
I basically, you were telling me in terms of, I wanted to inquire, how did you package it up? And you told me
Yeah,
because
so I
there are
didn't
lack
have
of
a line
business.
sheet at the beginning.
Okay.
Later on, I had line sheets, and often I definitely had line sheets with each collection. I had a lot of different collections because hair accessories and scarves are much smaller products than a bag or something like that. So I had collections. So my line sheets had the collections, had price points, had it very clearly labeled. So if they wanted to write an order, they just had the style number and the price. Sometimes people will provide an order sheet for the buyers where you put the price and the style number and they can check it off and write how many pieces. A lot of buyers like to use their own order sheet, so they won't use that, but make it as easy as possible for them to know what you're offering, what your price points are, what your delivery is. And think about delivery. You don't have to have anything set in stone. You can say delivery depends upon size of order. Delivery depends on time of year. It can be anything, but make sure to protect yourself. Don't put anything on any collateral you're giving them that you're not sure about. So it's okay to say, you know, if changes are made to our product, price will be discussed or anything. Just protect yourself in any way you can. But I do think a line sheet is a good thing to leave with her, and maybe a one pager about your brand. A one pager that tells why are you different? How are your bags made? What is the mission? If you have a mission behind your brand, you know, really who are you and what sets you apart? Because that's something you can leave behind so they won't forget who you are.
Thanks, Susan. I appreciate it.
Make it pretty, have some pictures, you know, make it fun, tell a story. Why did you start your brand? What makes you special? Because there are so many brands out there that telling your story is often a good way to make you memorable.
So I do have a media kit, and in the media kit, it has description of the product and also has the specs. And then in that media kit, it also has like the founder section, like why does the brand exist? And then I have the mission statement, and maybe like a company description. So I kind of use that as my kind of key elements to kind of describe. But I've also now most recently have created a document that talks about the competitive positioning. So I have different like bullets highlighting what makes the brand different from everyone else.
So it
Great.
sounds like you've done a lot of work, which sounds great. Yeah, and definitely leave something behind. To always leave something, especially if you have the opportunity to meet with them in person.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Of course.
Thanks, Susan and May.
Thank you.
You're
Does
welcome.
anybody else, even if you're not on camera, have a question?
Jonathan, you want to tell us anything about your clients or situations they faced?
Yeah, I mean, we represent everything from established brands to startup brands, and these discussions certainly interesting, especially hearing some of the ins and outs about Target. It's always the client's goal is to get into mass retail, and that's not always the cure for everything, right? So I think working with clients and making sure they have organic growth that fits the brand and what they're looking for, is the key. So we see a lot of challenges with brands doing direct to consumer and some of the using social media to sell and just seeing definitely infringements on the backside of that too. So, but it's like I said, it's always interesting to hear what my clients are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So I appreciate the conversation and the points you discussed.
Sure.
Anyone else who's not on camera? You don't have to come on camera to ask a question.
I think Pearl ended up having to leave us. I actually do have a question because people do ask me this quite a bit too, and how you feel about getting started just with dropship. Because so many, this is what I hear, and maybe, a lot of our people say, oh, they only want me to test dropship to start. But then in order to do that, I've got to pay for Commerce Hub, or I have to pay for something else.
I think it depends on the stage of your business.
Yeah.
How much, again, really looking at the numbers and making sure if that's how you're doing it, that you're going to make a margin that makes sense to you. Because in the end, all your hard work, you need to make money. And you need to do something that's not going to be overwhelming and take over your life, and it's not going to work. So I think I don't think there's anything wrong with that, as long as you know your numbers, know that you can afford to do it, and have some sense that it's going to start you off and then launch you into bigger things.
Yes.
I don't think it's a problem as long as you think about your numbers and what does it mean and what will it mean to the future of your brand.
Yeah. Another question actually that we get quite frequently from our members, because you brought it up a little bit about showrooms, what are all the fees for showrooms? What's reasonable to expect? How does it work? I was surprised to hear that there are some showrooms, when you were saying this, that don't allow you to do trade shows. That's to me a little crazy, but
Red flag number one.
Yeah, it was a little crazy to us too.
yeah. So we do get a lot of questions about showrooms. So, what's a typical fee? And how does it really work?
So when I was in my showroom, I think I started at $200 a month and it went up to maybe $350 a month. And then I paid 15% commission on every order they wrote. Before I went into the showroom, I did say, these are my clients. So there was an agreement that I had found these stores, and if I continued to get orders through them, that I would not pay a commission. You also want to negotiate if a store comes in, a bigger store, and they negotiate your price down, that the showroom is going to be willing to work with you and reduce the commission rate.
Oh, yeah.
So it used to be
yeah.
that if Anthropologie came in and my price went down by 40%, that they would reduce their commission rate by 40%. So that's something that's really important to make sure that they understand that. So the fees are really rent.
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
commission. And if there are any other fees, you need to really find that out up front.
Yeah.
15% is standard. You do not want to pay more than 15% commission. And if you are paying, you know, a higher rent, you need to know where you are in that showroom. You know, showrooms, at least they used to represent 15 to 20 brands. So if you had 15 to 20 accessory brands, you could be on the bottom shelf and nobody would ever see you. So you want to really have a discussion about who are they planning to pitch you to? Who are the stores that come in? How many appointments do they have a week? What does market week look like for them? And really make sure that you go to the showroom.
Mhm.
I think the problem is that the brand that we worked with never saw the showroom. So you need to go into that showroom. You need to see how
Yeah.
it's, you need to know how often do they change the displays? How, you know, does every brand get equal opportunity with buyers? Who do they have in mind for your brand? So just make sure you ask those questions up front. It's like anything else, just really make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into, and maybe set up a trial, 3-month trial, so that you're not signing a contract that's long, and find out when do they expect commission to be paid. Is it monthly?
Mhm.
How much after you've shipped the order? Because sometimes you're not going to get paid for 90 to 120 days. So then if you have to pay the commission on that before that, that's a hardship. So it's really understanding, or even going in with some of your own terms and say, you know, if it's a larger order, if it's above X amount, I will pay commission once I receive payment for the store. But the most important thing is you want to make sure they're your advocates and they're on your side. I was very lucky and had a great showroom, and we worked together. I mean, sometimes they always thought more was better, and I always thought less was better. So, you know, I had to have a million lines. Every trend they made me make thousands of samples, and it turned out that my basic stuff is what sold. So it's just really figuring out how much you want to listen to them, how much important are they, and what kind of connections do they have in the market, and knowing every cost that's associated with it. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we do get questions quite a bit about showrooms, so that's very helpful.
So
So-
we should talk offline about the questions you get and what kind of webinar we could do to answer those questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you know what? I think because it also, I mean, obviously we're based in New York, but there's a lot of people that have showrooms in Dallas, in
Yep.
Atlanta, in LA. So it's just not New York. There's showrooms all over
Right.
the country that people use, and big
And
showroom groups. So
I had showrooms in Dallas and LA. And the other things you have to think about is what's the cost? How many samples do they
Yeah.
need? And if you need to have a set of samples for every showroom, that's why I still have boxes of samples in my basement, because every
right?
season you had to ship another
Right.
set of samples. So that's another thing to think about, you know, what is it going to cost you to do this, and what are the benefits from it?
So, well,
I
that's
had a-
great.
Sorry,
Oh.
quick question. So I know some of the bigger box stores have chargebacks we've had clients where they get an allegation of infringement and they have to pull product, and that can be very detrimental to a relationship with like a Walmart or Target. But do other retail stores, or let's say like a Nordstrom or Saks, have a chargeback for pulling product for an IP violation?
They can charge you back for anything they want
Anything? Okay.
to.
Yes, unfortunately, they can.
And it's very hard to argue it. They can tell
Yeah.
you shipped them short when you know that you did not ship them short, and there's nothing you can do about it. So that's just part of the cost you have to work into selling to the larger stores.
Hmm.
And some are notorious for it, and some are better, some are worse. But
I mean, there are companies that all they do is recover chargeback money
Mhm.
from big box stores. And, you know, they make a percent. They're very successful at it, but you have to engage someone to actually do it for you. Sometimes it's very complicated.
and sometimes the cost of hiring them kind
Right.
of does. I mean, it depends how big your chargebacks are, how
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
And I mean, there's also the risk of a store going bankrupt. Barney's went bankrupt and made me a ton of money, and all I wanted to do was go into the store and take back all my products, but I couldn't. So, that's something else to think about in the world we live in, where a lot of the bigger stores are not doing as well. So,
So,
not to make it all
Well,
negative, selling to
yeah.
big has a lot of positives. So I'm not trying to put a
No, no,
negative.
no. I think you have to look at every perspective and have to know, you just have to understand going in about what the highs and the lows, the opportunities and the risks. And then you weigh it out. So,
Right.
but Susan and May, thank you so very much.
Yeah.
We did record this and it will go on to our YouTube page in just a couple hours once it uploads to the cloud. And then if anybody has any questions or any questions for Susan or May, their information, you can find it on our website as well under
put
the
it in the
member
chat.
roster, and she'll put it in the chat too. And thank you, everybody, for attending. And if you can, we have tomorrow our webinar on content. And then Thursday is our monthly member meetup. And don't forget to go and look at our spring magazine. It is out now. It looks fantastic. So, all right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Susan.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.